Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very spectacular episode of the Last Edit podcast, a podcast on film starring yours truly, Silver Hawkins, and the great.
Sid and Sleeve, hello there.
Now, last episode we talked about an iconic horror film in The Exorcist, and this episode we're going to talk about another iconic horror film that changed sort of the way horror films are made, which is 1999's The Blair Witch Project, by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sánchez, the directors. A movie that came out in 1999 and made an enormous splash in some, to a very large degree, as a result of a really effective marketing campaign. It basically founded the found footage genre like popularly, in terms of its influence. And I saw this, I think, around in '99, the year it came out, when it came up on a movie channel, like at 1 a.m. and really creeped me out. Like the only horror movie I remember having that impact on me, except maybe when I was a kid when I saw the original Poltergeist the first time. But I mean, the Poltergeist very soon lost its impact on me, and the Blair Witch never really did, because it goes to the most, I think, effective horror trope, which is also what made the Terror, which we talked about, so effective, which is loneliness and isolation and the unknown, and it couples all these three things together. And that makes it really, really effective, where you never see what is actually after the characters, what is pursuing them, what is hunting them. It is completely... You get, like, stories and myths around it, but whether those myths are accurate or not is completely left in the dark. It is up to you to sort of put these pieces together and sort of couple them together. Anyway, the movie is about three young filmmakers who are making a documentary about a fabled local character, in, I forget where exactly in the United States the movie takes place, but basically a somewhat rural town. And they have a local legend about a witch who has been, like, kidnapping children and so forth. And these three filmmakers go and then they investigate it. They go into the woods to sort of check out and film at some of the sites where local incidents allegedly occurred, like mass murders and such, and ritual murders. And then unfortunately they get lost in the woods, and things really start unraveling from there as something starts to hunt them, especially at night, at their campsites, and eventually, like, they're never heard from again, which is sort of, the movie sort of spoils that from the very onset, because it sort of alleges to be a documentary on the found footage from these people who went missing and were never seen again. Yeah, like I said, it was one of my favorite horror films when it came out, and it sort of remained that ever since for me. I know you had a very, very different experience watching it back in the day, but how
Yeah,
did you find returning to it?
really interesting. I did some background research again, watching making ofs and stuff because I hadn't watched it in such a long time. I wanted to understand the production process. Because I actually went to university with the mother of the main marketer of that film, who of course created or one of the people who created the viral marketing, which we hadn't
Yeah,
really seen in film before. Even things like they would go to film festivals with the film and they would put up missing posters of the
yeah,
main three characters, which is really, really funny.
and
Um,
of course that would create some issues for the actors, because the actors all use their real names in the movie.
yeah, yeah.
So, like, they
The
would
actress
have
who plays
family
Heather, her mum.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
would have
I thought that
family
was
members who got
hilarious.
a little nervous. Yeah,
Well, the line between reality and fiction kind of blurring for a bit there. So it was interesting because I watched it as you did. I think I watched it on opening weekend. I think I watched it with some friends at the time, and I hadn't been sold on it. I'd liked the techniques that I'd seen. I'd liked what they were trying to do, and I'd already seen a film a year prior, or maybe 9 months prior, called The Last Broadcast, which was also a found footage film. But as you said, this was the one that cemented the genre and truly popularized it. I think it only cost about 60 grand to make,
Yeah.
dollars wise, and yet it made, millions, upon millions afterwards. It was a weird one to go back to, I have to say, because my memory of it in '99 was a little bit bored. Nothing really hit me. I'd been to horror for so long even by then, and I don't know. A lot of people in the cinema were very really engaged, and I just wasn't quite. Now I'd seen it a few times after then, but this is probably the first time I'd seen it in excess of a decade, and I actually enjoyed it slightly more this time than I had prior times. Now I don't know if that's because just that massive gap of time has given me a bit more sense of appreciation of
Right.
some elements, or whether it was watching it with you as well, and we were picking little bits here that we liked and disliked. But I have a slightly better opinion than I did. So I love the setup. I love the move between the 16mm black and white and the 8mm or the video camera. I actually like the way that it's not as cinematic as a lot of found footage films would come later on. It's a lot rawer than that, and I
Yeah,
think that
for sure.
that both helps it and it both hurts it because techniques have moved on so well that some more films feel better to watch. But I think that's part of their problem. Whereas if you go back to Blair Witch, part of the way it works so well, the functions it creates in this documentary style between the two cameras, is because it feels so very grounded. You
Yeah.
know, there's one part in the film that was supposed to show the Blair Witch. I think Heather gets up and screams about three-quarters of the way through the film out of the tent. What is that? What is that? And the camera was supposed to pan to the left and see this woman dressed in white on a hill. And I think the fact the camera forgot to do that and they never reshot it helps the film so very much
Absolutely.
retain this grounding, because if you add that in, it becomes a supernatural thing. And although it semi is, because you never see it, your mind plays way more effectively than I think it would if you had have seen that. And then you had this conscious view of what this monster actually was. So I love the opening. I love them getting together. I think it's what Heather, Mike, and Josh are the three protagonists. I love them getting together and Heather like gathering her group because she's the director. It's her project. And I like the interviews with all the different townsfolk and the surrounding area of the woods that they're going to,
Yeah.
and their different stories and their kooky answers, and some are blasé and don't really care or believe, some kind of care, and some are actually kind of a little bit scared of the mythology surrounding the Blair Witch. I just think they're shot really well. They're shot in a very matter-of-fact news reportery kind of way, and I think
Yeah.
the actress who plays Heather does that really, really well.
Yeah. Whole local news type stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and she, is holding the mic up or part of the camera up and stuff like that, and she does little asides off camera. And I think that sets it up really nicely. And then we kind of kick into the actual the woods themselves, and all the townsfolk have been given different stories about the Blair Witch. Some cross over, some don't really make
Yeah.
sense and are outliers. But towards the end of the film, we do get a sense of some of them being kind of true. Well, the very, very end when we get there. What I like about the transition to the woods is that it starts off as almost like a camping trip. Everybody's happy and jolly and go lucky, and it only takes 2 or 3 days of complete and utter confusion about where they are, how the hell they're going to get out, the fact they're walking around in circles for the cracks to start emerging.
Yeah.
And I like that build up. I think it's paced relatively well. Especially when they start, it's not just the noise and stuff to begin with, it's simple things, isn't it? Like one of them falls in a river and is covered in water, and they start getting stressed out because they're running out of supplies, and yet they wander around in circles. But then they start hearing the sounds at night, and they start coming across things in the woods, which indicates somebody or something is playing with them, playing on their mind. And on that subconscious level, as well as the conscious level, the atmosphere is really building and quite intense at times. And mainly it's just the three principals who I think perform really, really well in each of their roles.
Yeah.
Mike is the
Absolutely.
first one. Mike is the first one to properly lose it,
Yeah.
and he does so throughout the film. But then slowly but surely, Josh starts losing it. Heather, who's been trying to keep it together, also starts losing it. And they've got a nice
I,
dynamic, I think.
and the dynamic I really like in when they start getting lost in the woods
Mm,
is a very human one with Heather, where Heather's continuing sort of a reaction to the fact that she doesn't really know where they are is denial, complete denial. No, I know where we're going. We're not
yeah.
lost. We're not actually lost, despite the fact that no, we are lost. But I'm not. I'm if I actually acknowledge that fact, then we're really lost. Like then it's game
Yeah.
over. So I can't actually acknowledge that fact. I have to, even though reality is constantly staring me in the face, I have to deny reality and sort of engage in this sort of fantasy that no, we're not lost, which is a dynamic that also plays out in the series Chernobyl, where you have these people who deny that no, the reactor can't possibly have blown up. That's impossible. That's not a reality. Even though they're staring like pretty much straight into the open reactor. Like no,
I have to start
yeah,
watching that. It's on the list.
no, like no, like the reactor hasn't blown up. No, that's impossible. Because if they actually recognize the fact that the reactor has blown up, well, then they're already dead. So it
Mm.
just so they have to sort of engage in this absurd reality that isn't real. And it's the same with Heather, because if she actually gives in to the reality that they're lost, well, where do they go from there? I mean, it's much easier, it's more convenient, and it's safer for her, even though it really isn't. But it feels
Yeah,
that way.
definitely.
To engage in this fantasy that no, we're not lost. I know what we're doing. I know where we're going. And that's a really really human angle, and I find that really compelling. Because we see that play out all the time with human beings.
Well, the classic is in the car, isn't it? When you're, a group of people together and one person is the driver, knows what they're doing and knows where they're going, won't listen to anybody, obstinate to the end. And that's what Heather basically is throughout the film. I mean,
Yeah,
we start out by not working out where they are on a map. They can't figure out where they are and where they should go. And then they try compasses. Only Heather has got that. That's hers. There's one point she says. And and then the map goes missing. We later find, I think it's Mike who
yeah. Threw it in the
throws it
river.
somewhere or something. And then the only thing they've got left to do is follow the river. And they do it over and over again to no avail because they can't find their way out. And
Yeah,
watching their breakdown one by one is quite fun. It is also one of the parts I have a slight problem with in the movie in that I think the pace at this point is all over the shop. And it doesn't really know how to establish itself in a nice build-up because it's intense, then it's not. And I get it because it's supposed to be looser than a standard horror film by definition. I do think one thing works really well, then you and I have talked about it when watching the film, and that's the fact that one of my massive bugbears with found footage films has always been the excuse about why the camera
yeah,
is being used in that situation in the bloody first place. Now, it strains a little bit at times, but for the most part, the excuses that Heather has for using the camera, and even towards the end, especially that kind of last before the ending, that little part before the house, are really well done. It's
yeah.
not like it's not the Cloverfield where I don't know a 700-foot monster is chasing you down, but I've got to use this camera. Just it's the only light source I've got. Yeah, bollocks.
Yeah.
And we see it in other found footage films as well. Very contrived.
And not only like in the reasoning, but also just because so much of this movie is filmed at like angles that are not like classical cinematography.
Oh, not at all. No, 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 not at all.
Like like perpendicular, crooked, whatever. Like
Camera hanging down where they speak and then back up again. A literal
yeah,
camera shooting in the dark with no light,
yeah. I
which
mean
I think is quite effective.
that's one of my favorite things about the movie is that there are a number of sections in the movie where the camera is basically just completely dark and all you get is audio, which
Yeah,
is immensely powerful because that leaves everything to your imagination. Like all you
it
get
does.
is
Yeah.
just the audio of what is happening, and that becomes really really creepy and unnerving. So I think the way that it executes that is really effective. I didn't have as much of an issue with the pacing. I think because for me, the movie sustains sort of this underlying tone of dread throughout.
Yeah.
With the growing isolation as they get lost in the woods, and especially as they keep coming across these events that happen, like when they wake up one morning after they've heard a couple of noises, and they find that someone's been outside their tents in their camp and has sort of organized these neat little rock piles, like just around their tents. It is just immensely creepy. Like the idea that someone's just been walking around here, just doing this, like right next to us. Yeah, really creepy.
I like it when they've gone through all this stuff and they're really now like Heather has now finally admitted, yeah, I don't know where we are,
Yeah,
and she doesn't know what to do, and she's blaming herself because she's the one who got them into this situation, and after a little while, when at this point everybody is losing their shit, they don't know what to do, they can't comprehend what's happening, they think they're being stalked, as you said, by some supernatural thing or something at least. They're running out of everything, they're getting incredibly tired, and they end up coming to a place in the woods where these wooden symbols are everywhere, and all of a sudden you just see their faces almost go white
yeah,
because they don't know what to make of it. I mean, it's and then the way that the Blair Witch symbols and related symbols are all designed out of sticks and
yeah.
bits of
The
hay and other
paganism.
materials, paganism, yeah, and yeah, it's creepy and it's unnerving because we still haven't. Normally, by this point in this kind of film, you'll have seen some indication of where the hell this is coming from, even if it's
Yeah,
a cutaway
or
or
like a
it's a
shadow
silhouetted
flickering or
shot.
something, or yeah,
Exactly, yeah, something. But we don't have that at all. So we have the same perceptual subjectiveness as the protagonists. We don't know what's going on either because we're locked into their worldview. I really like the way that builds and builds and builds. And then, of
there's
course, we.
there is one moment in the movie where something basically kind of breaks into their tent, and they run away, and we never see what it is, but they see what it is,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
their like terror at seeing what it is pretty palpable. To where
yeah.
they run off.
Camera pointed down
Yeah,
as Heather runs away. And I think is it Josh that goes missing first of the three? He's
Josh
the
goes
one we.
missing. Yeah,
Yeah, we can't hear him. And then they find a fingertip or a finger?
like a finger and I think a piece of flesh or a
Piece
tongue
of
or
flesh.
something.
Yeah. And that's the first point at which shit
After
just got
after
real.
and they find that after they hear him like screaming in the night.
Yeah, yeah. And they're screaming throughout the woods trying to find him, and they're not getting anything back. And then we get the physical horror, in a very, very limited way, obviously. But, this is what this thing is doing, and Josh is probably dead. Probably. I like that whole sequence. I like the build up to it. I like the speed at which it happens. I mean, it happens in a split second when they're running
Yeah,
across the woods and screaming and stuff. And I think just prior to that, is we should mention the very famous shot, which has been parodied 100,000 times in everything from scary movies
yeah,
to
with
every other bloody horror
Heather's
film.
monologue. Yeah,
Yeah, with the snot dripping from her nose and slowly making its way down her face like a tear and a raindrop, something across a window, but in a really weird way. But yeah, that's the famous one anyway. It's quite effective and it shows her absolutely truly scared.
yeah, at her wits'
And
end,
yeah, and it's like her last I don't know.
her lowest moment. Yeah,
Yeah, her lowest moment throughout the film. She truly doesn't know what to do at this point, and things are going south quickly. Now,
and there,
the end. No, go
yeah,
on.
no, just because we are getting to the end. I mean, when they reach the cabin, it gets sort of even more creepy. Not just by the fact that what they find in the cabin, but because ostensibly, like this is Rustin Parr's cabin, like who's sort of the local killer, who's mentioned in some of the myths, who got sort of who was whispered to by the Blair Witch to murder like 7 children
Hmm.
in his cabin. And they reach the cabin, but of course the issue is what makes it creepy is that Rustin Parr's cabin burned down back in the day, and yet here it is, like still standing. So there's this notion of, are they in a time warp? Is there, what is going on? that just gets raised even further at that point. And then you get inside the cabin where you find these like little children's palm prints on the walls and stuff, and it's just it's really really effective.
The actual notion of coming across a house like that in the middle of the woods when you haven't seen it before really reminds me of like Hansel and Gretel in Discovering the Witch and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really like that. But yeah, you're right. When they actually get into this house, this dilapidated, kind of concrete-ish wooden hut in the middle of the forest they haven't seen before. Wow, the way it's, as you said, that there's kids' handprints everywhere. There's destroyed trash, and it's very oppressive. It ties into the rest of the film, and it's oppression of the protagonist, it's oppression of the audience and how we feel while we're in there. And the camera becomes even more intense, if that can be a thing, given it's pretty intense throughout the entire film. But at this point, no one's intending on filming anything as such. They're just kind of using it because they have it, and it's a bloody torch.
Yeah.
It's the only source of light they have. And then, of course, we get the very quick moments. Mike is chasing down the corridor because he thinks he's heard Josh. Heather's trying to keep up, but can't quite keep up. And he's just screaming, going from room to room because he keeps hearing what he thinks is Josh. And then he goes silent. And we're like, oh no. And then that final shot where we don't really even hear anything. We just hear the scream again, and the camera goes down. I think is it end on like Heather's foot or something like that. She's dragged away or something happens there.
No, you don't even see her foot, and it just drops to the floor.
Just the camera drops, right? And that's a really unusual way of ending even a horror film. But it does work. It does work because it leaves the audience not only with this truly ambiguous sense of what the hell just happened and who the hell is doing this, but it's also, it reminds me oddly of the end of Monty Python's Holy Grail, where they just ran out of money and just film done.
I mean,
even though it's not that.
There are so many questions. Who attacked them? Like, was it the Blair Witch? Was it Rustin Parr if they were in a time warp? Was it Josh being like possessed or whatever you want to say, like Rustin Parr was back in the day?
Yeah.
Or like there are so many options for who attacked them back down there. I mean, there's this it ties back into the ending ties back into the Rustin Parr legend that they hear at the start of the movie, where when he killed the children, Rustin Parr would force one of them to like stand in the corner and face the wall while he killed the others. And as Heather moves down into the basement, she finds Mike standing in the corner facing the wall.
Yeah.
And then she gets attacked. It's a really, really effective ending, and it just leaves you going like, whoa. At least it did for me back in the day.
Well, it's so effective because of that, I think. And I mean, it doesn't have the same impact now that it had then, because then it was massive cinema thing. It was brand new. No one had really come across it before. And of course, the viral marketing campaign had a lot of people thinking that it was real for some reason. But that was a really big thing at the time.
Well, I mean, it has a really authentic feel to it, which is more than can be said for a lot of other found footage films.
No, absolutely. And he uses so little cinematic techniques that it adds to that feeling, not just documentary, but student documentary, Loose everything, nothing really framed
it's
properly.
Basically a dogma film.
Yes, that's a very good way of describing it. It certainly fits into that category. Very low tech. Single look.
Just handheld cameras, natural light, natural audio.
Yeah, naturalistic presentation in everything, including its performances, which are somewhat improvised throughout the film. They had a loose script to work from, but a lot of improvisation happened between those characters when they were on set, I was going to say, but on Forest, that will do.
Yeah, I mean, they were basically like the three actors were basically sent out into the woods to camp at specific sites, where the crew would then come and like make all the noises in the night and stuff, and they
freak them out,
and at each site they would like get notes individually, like this is what you'll be doing in this scene, and they were fairly loose notes, so you wouldn't have like Heather's monologue is not scripted. That is Heather improvising that monologue. It's just basically her note says you're acting contrite. You're realizing that you let everyone hear, and you're overcome with regret and so forth, and that's your direction. Go, and then she goes. So So that I think that way of filmmaking really also helps add to the authenticity of it because it feels
Mm.
natural. It doesn't feel scripted, um, and
Yep, she
there
had.
is a chemistry between the three actors.
There is, and yeah, she definitely has her Rutger Hauer tears in rain moment, as it were. Different context, but similar
Yeah,
principle. Yeah, I going back to it, I do not think it's as bad as I thought it was before. Still not up there with my favorite horror films. I would say it's a very decent horror film, and I would really recommend that you don't watch it with people. Just don't.
yeah,
It's
by
not.
yourself in a like dark room.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In a cinema, okay, if you're not with too many people, because in a cinema the sound works even better because it's so raw and in your face. But
or I mean with headphones.
oh
Headphones.
yeah, headphones
Um,
absolutely. But I think watching this with other people, or even just watching it with the lights on, chilling out with your phone, you're just gonna laugh at many parts, and you will get bored because you're not looking at the nuance within the performances or the impending doom that seems to be arriving upon them. It's very easy to just miss stuff and then lose your way in watching the film. I think with this, so if you do want to
yeah,
watch it, and I recommend it at least once, as Silver said, you might find it to be one of your very favorite horror films because of its ambiguity and its very vague nature and the way it's shot. You might also be like me and be a little bit about it, but like I said, going back to it, I certainly enjoyed it more this time than I had prior times, for whatever reason that was.
yeah. I mean, I think part of the reason why I love it so much is just that it's one of the quintessential examples of less is more.
Hmm.
Which is, I
Refrain,
think,
yeah.
unfortunately, becoming increasingly rare. I don't know. I don't know that that's even necessarily true. Actually, I think that it's just that it's always sort of been rare because we always sort of gravitate towards the spectacle or whatever.
We do, yeah. I think horror is the one genre that tends to strip back when it can, if it can, depending on what it is.
Yeah,
Because usually horror films are made on such low budgets that you have to find creative ways of doing stuff, and it's certainly a creative way of doing things with this particular. I think one interesting thing I heard when I was doing the research afterwards as well is that not only did they make this absolute ton of money from 60 grand, but even the 16mm black and white camera they took back to the shop they loaned or bought it from, whatever, and got their money back afterwards to stretch the budget even further.
yeah,
I thought that's proper maverick indie filmmaking,
yeah,
which I really really like. I really like that. It's like like Evil Dead to me is one of those films that was made on shoestring budget, and they did all these crazy things, and I love that when you're under so much pressure that you haven't got any cost, any real money to push into whatever you need. It makes you think in a much more creative way, and that's what they do throughout this film.
yeah, for sure. Definitely
Well,
recommended.
yeah, recommended. Go and give it a watch. It's only an hour and a half, I think, and it's a very very different horror film. And if you haven't watched a lot lost footage or found footage film before, this is way better than most of what you've seen. This is way better than your VHSs. This is way better than your Paranormal Activities, all the ones that take it to that next kind of silly level, I think.
Yeah,
So, the granddaddy, as it were. Well worth it. Okay, well, I have gone a little mad. I am choosing a film, wait for it, Silver, from 2019. That's this year. I chose this because you sent me a trailer, and then I completely forgot I'd ever watched the trailer. And then a couple of days ago, I was like, oh, it's on Netflix. I'll give that a go. And that is Eddie Murphy's Dolomite is My Name. And I didn't see this coming. I don't know. Like I said, I'd heard Murphy was making a couple more films. I knew one of them was coming to America too. I knew one was a Netflix project, and all of a sudden it just snuck up on me, and boom, it was out. And I was like,
yeah,
I better give this a watch. And I didn't know half of the context, which is like odd. Like I said to you by the podcast, I'm a huge rap fan. I didn't know that this guy was essentially one of the originators of rap in that way. I didn't know about the blaxploitation kind of angle the films being made at that time. I didn't know about this guy and his friends who just
yeah. Made a
made this
movie.
like
Yeah,
made this movie and then went on to
but
make like another
kind of
seven.
Ed Woodish. Yeah,
It is, and I love films like that. I love films that are inherently about the process of making films, especially that maverick sense where you can't get the money, you're scraping by, you're doing really cool and weird things to try and alleviate the other things that you can't
much like
control.
Bowfinger, another Eddie Murphy movie as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm also really happy Eddie Murphy's back, man. Like I
Yeah,
haven't
me
seen him in a
too.
film for so long, and this seems different. You know, he went through that little period of comedies that didn't really work very well, and he just went away. And all of a sudden
Yeah,
now,
he
I
was
hope
in
come
Dreamgirls, and he's been in like a couple of things since then.
yeah, yeah, or
Seriously,
smaller roles.
or yeah,
But back
where
here,
he's been good.
take him a title lead, and I think well, we'll talk about it next week. But really, really bloody good film, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be interesting to talk about. So that's it for next episode. Please join us for Dolomite is my name, and thank you for joining us for this one. And if you've seen Blair Witch Project, please let us know your thoughts about it in the comment section. Let's talk film. That's what we are here for.
We are indeed.
Thanks for watching, guys, and thanks for listening. Until next time, this has been the Last Edit Podcast, and take care.
Take care, everybody.